Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 31. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or elsewhere, you are, of course, very welcome. It is a celebration week. Oh, no, it hasn't gone. Why hasn't it gone? I thought I'd blow the cake out there. Celebration week. Off we go, lovely. Because, of course, this is one of our guests' birthdays today, so we'll start by saying, good evening, Jack. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Gareth. Just trying
And
to get rid of all this
Happy
effect.
birthday, Jack.
Yes, I hope you enjoy the cake that we've very generously provided for you at a huge cost of absolutely nothing to us. So enjoy and thank you for joining us. Tonight, as ever, we hope you're going to join in with our wide array of topics. You can do so using the hashtag SD31. We will be discussing quite a variety of things tonight, as you're going to see from our guests, and we hope you join in. Let's go through and meet each of our guests now and see what it is that they're going to be talking about. We're going on my screen tonight from right to left. We start with a new guest. It's Milton Graham, who's broadcasting to us tonight from Northern Ireland. Milton is a member of NI21 and I think describes himself as being broadly on the left of politics. Good evening, Milton. How are you?
Good evening. Very, very well. Yeah.
It's nice to welcome you to the show. It's nice to have people on from Northern Ireland again. It's been several weeks, so it's good to have that part of the UK here. For those who don't know, can you tell us what NI21 is, please?
NI21 is a fairly new party for Northern Ireland, and sure, pretty much everyone's aware of the political divide in Northern Ireland. NI21 is trying to kind of find or celebrate things that unite everyone rather than pick out the things that divide everyone and celebrate them in people's separate communities. Find the things like celebrating the there's a unique kind of Northern Irish identity, and you can celebrate that together. There's no reason why we need to be divided on that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And what's your topic going to be for tonight?
I'm going to talk about electoral systems.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is a returnee, but it's the first time he's been on with me. It's Michael Craig, who is a member of the Conservative Party and is broadcasting tonight from the wilds of northern Scotland. If I'm right, how are we, Michael?
It's central Scotland, but you know.
I'm so sorry. You see, even from the north of England, that is still the wilds of Scotland. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Now, you've had a long train journey to join us tonight. We're very grateful. Can you tell us what's the topic you're going to be introducing?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking about the budget tonight, because it's quite a big deal that happened this week. So.
Marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. The first majority Conservative budget since 1996. So, yes, it is indeed quite big. Let's go to our next guest. Is another new guest. It's Joe Dalrymple Hornby. I actually haven't a clue where you're broadcasting from actually tonight, Joe.
London, the great
London.
city of London.
Marvellous. So we are literally the corners of the UK tonight, aren't we? Joe is a member of the Labour Party, and he is here tonight to talk about what?
I'm going to talk about whether sort of parties on the left should be open to the idea of leaving the EU or actually properly reforming the EU, because there are strong arguments based in left-wing sort of philosophy that you can make in terms of why we should leave.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, just for a point of information here, you have a leadership election going on, of course. Who is it at this point in time that you're backing for Labour leader?
I'm not backing anyone, but I'd be happy with either Andy or Yvette. Liz Kendall's far too right-wing, and Jeremy Corbyn is unelectable. So any of the centralists too. But Jeremy Corbyn is making it interesting.
Well, that's certainly true. Thank you very much for joining us, Joe. Next, it is the birthday boy. It is Jack Hughes. Good evening, Jack. 29 years old today.
Excuse you, Gareth.
Look at absolute horror on his face there. I'm so sorry, Jack. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on your birthday. I know your big celebrations were yesterday, which is why you're able to join us today.
Yeah.
So thank you. You're coming tonight from Leeds?
Leicester.
Leicester. I knew it began with an L. You see how well prepared I am for tonight's show, everybody. I know everything about our guests. So from Leicester. Jack is a member of the Liberal Democrats. And what is your topic going to be tonight?
My topic is, should we legalise cannabis? Essentially.
Ooh. Now, is that at all related to the leadership election that you are having in your party at this point in time? Because I know that that's been discussed. So, have you voted? Because the deadline is very close, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a Norm Trooper.
A Norm Trooper. So you voted for Norman Lamb.
Yeah.
Okay, and he's gone big on the decriminalisation argument, hasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Last but by no means least, currently he's muted, but he's muted himself. It's not me who's done it. It's Daryl Devine, back by much demand. Also coming from Scotland. Daryl is, I think, a supporter in general of Scottish independence and the SNP, but he's very entitled to correct me because I have been wrong on quite a lot tonight so far. So how are we, Daryl?
I'm very well, thanks, and I'm just a general supporter of anything that takes us away from the evil of Westminster.
Westmonster, surely you should call it that. That would sort of be a great portmanteau for it.
Probably.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you're also going to join in on the debate tonight, in particular about the budget, aren't you? Because that was one of the topics that you were going to raise. So there we are. So that is our panel for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Just for clarity and for openness, my name's Gareth. I'm your host. I'm a Conservative, but I will do my best to put all of your points that you tweet to us using the hashtag SD31 to our guests. And of course, tonight we're going to be attempting the calling issue. We'll see if that works. We've had several people DM us asking for the number. So if during the show you feel you want to come on air briefly and make some comments or pose a question, and you're one of the people who have DM'd us and got the number, give us a call and we'll see how it works. However, I am using quite a... I don't know quite how to describe this phone politely, but it is certainly an inexpensive. So we'll see whether or not...
conservative phone.
A very cost efficient. Does the job well without charging anyone too much money. Fair enough. So we'll see how that goes. But we'll begin tonight. The laser selection process before the show chose that Joe would be opening the topic first. Always seems cruel when they're a new guest. However, I'm sure this will be absolutely marvellous. Joe, it's over to you.
So I wanted to talk about sort of why on the left I think sort of Labour Party, maybe not Lib Dems, but certainly the Greens and even the SNP should sort of consider maybe why we should leave the EU. I think the obvious arguments about sort of parliamentary sovereignty are sort of arguments that every party can subscribe to, but particularly with sort of, we're going to discuss voter reform later on, but if you want to talk about sort of democratic will of the people, then I don't think the EU sort of helps that. All parties now agree we should sort of control immigration with a points-based system, which save money. And the old arguments about the EU saying, you know, the whole is better than the sum of its parts in terms of sort of political might, well, that's clearly rubbish with what's happened with Russia invading Ukraine. The EU has not been able to stop that. Similarly, people say that post-World War II we need an organisation to keep peace in Europe. But just look at what's happening, you know, today, literally as I speak, Germany bullying Greece into further austerity that people don't want. And so the economic argument, we'd be able to have free trade with countries outside the EU. We wouldn't have to subscribe to undemocratic, sort of non-left-wing sort of trade agreements such as TTIP. And, you know, countries like Germany would still sell us cars. There's this big myth that we'd be isolated. I don't think it's true. And I think a lot of the arguments about democracy and about stopping big American corporations being able to come in and being able to sue the government are strong reasons why, you know, particularly the Labour Party, I think, you know, the party of the trade unions, should consider whether it's so sensible to be so strongly against the EU, and particularly the SNP. The SNP's whole anti-Westminster rhetoric is very similar to UKIP's anti-Brussels rhetoric. So I often find it difficult when you hear people like Nicola Sturgeon strongly supporting the EU but being so anti-Westminster.
Thank you very much indeed. A few comments already. Some about the phone, some describing it variably as a brick or a drug dealer's phone, which you might want to borrow it for your moment, Jack. No, I'm not so you need that. So thank you for that. Josh says that's a brick, not a phone. He says Moses read the commandments from that. Thank you, Josh Aaron R. Now, in terms of the EU, Jack Robinson UK says, sorry, is Labour a left-wing party? I missed that. Dylan H. Morris at Dylan HM says, full federalisation now, so he might have a slightly different view on that. Daniel Who says, quite a few Greens I know will campaign to leave the EU if TTIP is passed. Matthew Thomas at MRT95_. It was actually the left that were most against the EU back in the 70s. Joe Hudson Small at Joe Hudson Small. Greece shouldn't have bloody lied about meeting the entry requirements to the euro then. And John Hudson Mousley at Les Fox says, Joe is my new favourite Labour person. And there's also lots of support for your cheekbones coming in there, Joe. Of course, that's not relevant to the particular point here. 2 more points, and then I'm going to open it up to the panel. Robert Winfield at Robert Winfield 2. In the 1970s, the SNP opposed the common market, describing the UK as the English common market. Salman Anwar at Amazing Anwar. Although I'm committed to Europe, massive reasons for the left to be Eurosceptic: democracy, TTIP, Greece, corporations, etc. So, I'm going to come to you, if I may, Darryl, because there was that point about the common market. We know that the SNP, for example, and a lot of the people who are pro-Scottish independence view Scotland's future as being within the EU. Based on what you've heard tonight, does that not rather defeat the point of becoming independent?
It does to an extent, but it's all about trying to level up whether or not being in the EU is more of an asset to us. And initially, my opinion was just straight away, no, we'll stay in it. There's, you'd lose out in the free travel and the free trade. It would just be, just absolute stupidity to leave. But then I actually, done my research and looked into it, and there is some nefarious activity going on with some part of the EU, giving Greece that bailout, but under the conditions they implement austerity under their terms. That doesn't sound like a good ideology to hold yourself to. And there's other things as well that makes the issue a lot more greyer and much less black and white. So at the moment, I'm just not sure. Like, obviously, David Cameron's having the vote come up in a few years to whether or not to leave. And looking into recent activities, I'm not exactly sure which way I would vote. There's a lot of good things, but there's also a lot of bad things sort of on the undercurrent of the EU right now that we should look into.
Thank you. Now, Jack, the Liberal Democrats have long been seen and long painted themselves as the champions of the European Union, as the most pro-EU party. What's your view on the fact that actually there's a big argument for the left to say this is an undemocratic institution, it doesn't help people, it's only there to help corporations and big business, actually we should be looking to get out?
I don't agree with the when people say if we left the EU it'd be disaster. We'd be okay if we left the EU, but do you want to be okay, or do you want to be? I don't know. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I know others would argue that
it's broke.
It is broke, but I don't know. How are you going to fight things like international climate change and things like that if you're not part of the EU? And if, say, I'm just going to target things and talking about them.
No, I have landed you with quite a big question. I sort of
you're like, so tell me how the EU is amazing. I don't think the EU is amazing, but I do think we're better off inside the EU, and I don't understand why countries such as Greece lied about entering the EU, and people saying, oh, now they have austerity and things like that, but they got bailed out twice. No one forced the Greece government to overspend. It's their mess.
Yeah. I did sort of land you there with challenging the entire European view based on the party, which might be construed a little bit harsh. So thank you very much for that. Let's go to what some might see as partly the other side. Thinking about those who are more on the right of the political spectrum now, Michael. Obviously, there's a divide in the Conservative Party between those who would like to stay in, most of whom want some sort of reform, but many who are quite vehemently in favour of leaving. Now, what's your view in terms of, because the left tends to have been seen as being pro-EU, how do you think that might affect the debate in the Conservative Party if the left starts to split like this?
Well, I think it's a shame that like the EU has become such a left-right issue in the past few years with UKIP, etc. Because well, traditionally Labour were the Eurosceptic party. I mean, Harold Wilson held the referendum, and then Michael Foot wanted to leave the EU in his longest suicide note in history in 1983, and yeah, I think I would class myself as a Eurosceptic probably, but I'd probably still vote to stay in. I mean, I'd like to see meaningful reform, but...
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to go again now to someone slightly on the left. Now, Northern Ireland, of course, has a completely different approach to this whole matter, doesn't it, Milton? Because, I mean, your parties there don't automatically follow the same split, but you have, I think it's fair to say, more parties who are overtly pro and overtly anti-EU than perhaps the mainland UK does. What's your take on this issue about the view from the left?
Well, I really don't see the need to kind of start shutting ourselves off from the rest of Europe because of maybe border issues or immigration issues. I think there's a great deal that we can do inside Europe. We can, the UK isn't that large. It's a wealthy country and everything, but it doesn't have a massive military in comparison to China, Russia, the USA, or any of these other countries. So we can achieve a lot more inside the EU, I think, rather than cutting ourselves off from it and trying to, make it on our own.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read a few more comments now. Those of you who've got the phone number, if one of you wants to try calling at this point, if you've got a point you want to make, we'll see if the brick/thing that Moses read the commandments from /drug dealer phone will actually let us do that. A couple of comments people have made here. Comte de Frou at Stratohuvius, hello Matt. I don't think you necessarily need the arcane bureaucracy that exists within the EU to collectively fight climate change, etc. Alessia at the Blonde Pond, I don't think I feel well enough to follow political seriousness on Spectrum tonight. We need the banter. You never know, Alessia, stay with it. We don't know what's going to happen yet. John Mousley, name one thing that the EU has fought successfully. You can't, and that explains a lot. We've got a graph tweeted by Cameron at Cameron_surname, which is about the level of trade done from the UK elsewhere, and that's been retweeted. Where are we? Leon French at Leon_French01. I'm still waiting for some really convincing arguments on both sides of the EU debate in general. Confused Ninja, the EU should have done better due diligence too, and that's in reference to Greece. He also adds the EU has too much of an imbalance. The EU needs to strengthen the weaker economies. There's too much of an imbalance at the moment. Callum Christie at Christie Callum, the EU annoys all sides by virtue of its socialist capitalist goals, too socialist for the right and too capitalist for the left. And where are we? There was another tweet there I read. I want to read out, but it's gone. Oh, here, Sammy at BuxtyY. I didn't know how to pronounce YY. Agree with Milton on staying in the EU for the cooperation benefits in terms of the economy and immigration. Salman Anwar, in terms of the argument about peace, says we're still in NATO. Arik Galinsky at A Galinsky. Okay, tuning in. Who are these people? Hello, Arik. Well, it's me for starters, and lots of others, and you'll know that. Jack Robinson, the EU is amazing. Federalise, unify, and run the world. And Joe Hudson Small, we do have the 5th or 7th biggest military spending worldwide. Not that it's entirely relevant to being part of the EU. I thought it was about the 3rd or 4th biggest military spending worldwide, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. Still no one's attempted to phone in. This might be a good thing. Anyone want to add some... Joe, you wanted to come back on something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of sort of cooperation, we are part of sort of, G8 and we are part of NATO, so we have other groups. And if you look at what the EU has achieved, what has it achieved on climate change so far? Very little. What did it do to stop Russia illegally invading Ukraine? Nothing. How has it diffused the situation between Greece and Germany? If anything, it's got involved, and the EU itself has sided itself with Germany to bully Greece, even though that's a matter for the Eurozone, not the EU. So I don't think as a body it's actually been that effective in trying to achieve these global aims. And I just feel that even if you look at the economic argument and there are pros and cons, if you just look about getting our own parliamentary sovereignty back, for the SNP, that's enough for Scotland to become independent. A lot of people say that Scotland's economy would be worse off if they left, but the SNP would say, yes, but we want to vote for our own government. That's the priority for us. And I would say that particularly the SNP, you could have a similar argument here in saying, yes, there may be economic risks, but the EU is hardly a growing economy compared to Asia and other economies. And second of all, surely it's worth it to create our own laws.
Thank you very much. We have a call. I don't know who it's from. I don't know if this is going to work. But let's see. Now we're on loudspeaker. Hello.
Hello, it's Leon. I've only just realised I'm about 5 minutes behind.
Oh, hello. Can you all hear that? Speak again, Leon.
Sorry?
Talk. Say something.
Was it built with loudspeakers?
What I was going to ask is...
Can you all hear that, by the way? Yeah, go on.
What I was going to ask Joe first is, considering the leadership contenders seem to be a hell of a lot more pro-EU than he is, especially the ones he's backing, how does he feel about that? And about everybody else, how do they feel that they could reform the EU for their own benefits, as such for their parties or ideologies?
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Leon. Thank you. Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think so.
Brilliant. So, Joe, in terms of leadership candidates, what do you think about that?
Well, there's the leadership candidates, and none of them are really that inspiring at the moment, and I don't think the EU is the key issue for the Labour Party at the moment. We'll leave the Conservatives to divide themselves over that. I think maybe sort of people are scared to make the argument, and it's sort of UKIP has sort of hijacked the EU argument and made it almost purely about immigration, and it's only when things like TTIP come up in the news you get particularly members of the Green Party suggesting that maybe we should leave it. So I think because the argument has become so immigration focused, it's very difficult for anyone from the Labour Party. We had the whole immigration mugs that people like Diane Abbott criticised during the election, and I just think it's very difficult for a Labour person to come out against the EU because you'd be so closely associated with UKIP, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to come in and talk to us about what they think, Leon's other point about reform of the EU, what changes might help their party?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Please.
Joe said a little while ago that the EU has achieved nothing in terms of environmental aims. If you look at the motor industry, for example, there's actually fairly strict regulations on the emissions of new cars being built today, and they have a lot of quite technical equipment in them to deal with the emissions that come out of them and everything. So, I mean, in the last 15 or 20 years, the emissions that come out of cars has fallen by quite a bit. So they're a lot cleaner and everything. So they do, and these are things that are coming from Europe. These aren't individual governments legislating for these things, although there are different rules in different parts of the EU. So that there are things that they are doing in terms of, some of the things you mentioned there.
Thank you very much. Michael, we know that reform and change is something that the Conservative leader, the Prime Minister, is trying to get. But, I mean, what would he actually be able to get that would satisfy many in the Conservative Party?
He won't get anything that will satisfy some people in the Conservative Party. I think the best thing for the Conservative Party is to have a referendum, though. I mean, it's long overdue. I'd like to think it might end some of the splits in the party, but I might just be being quite naive there. A lot of Tories want treaty change, and I just don't think that treaty change is going to happen whatsoever. And so I think, despite what David Cameron gets back, it's not going to be enough for most of Eurosceptics in the party.
I think what's going to happen, so if I could just jump in, I think it's going to be proposed treaty change. So we'll go into the vote with Merkel having promised something, and Cameron will say, if you vote to stay in, then we'll get this treaty change. But there'll be nothing concrete.
It's interesting though, because Merkel seems to be the leader that's kind of giving Britain the most in this, whilst a lot of the other EU leaders just won't budge on a lot of these things.
Thank you very much. A few more points people have made on here. Darren Grimes at Darren Grimes _ says, give us TTIP, yum, free trade. Danny Richardson at Danny John RI. Because of the EU, that any meaningful sanctions can be placed on Russia. It provides economic security for smaller member states. Andrew at Andrew Gavin N. I don't think the public are seeing the distinction between the EU and immigration in general. It's become a taboo issue. Sammy at Buxty Y. So taking the anti-EU stance is bad, point blank, because it would align you closer to the right. The question he's asking there. Matthew Thomas, he agrees that UKIP have ruined the EU argument with too much focus on immigration. There are many more issues besides that. And Joe Hudson Small says he could well be in favour of a federal EU, just as his support for the federal UK would also, though, depend on the specifics. Jack Robinson UK, I can't wait till the EU referendum breaks the Conservatives. And Dylan Morris, we have a call coming in. It's it's my nan. No, not now, Nan. I'm hosting Spectrum Debate. It's a little bit insensitive, Dylan. Both of my nans are dead. But never mind, we'll get over that. So, Daryl, you were talking a minute ago. You sort of agreed with some of the points that Joe made. Is there anything the EU could do, you think, that would make it's an obvious choice for an independent Scotland to remain a member?
Well, it would certainly have to change a lot of its internal politics concerning things like austerity and the way that it's managing a lot of its economy, because either that, because the SNP has always been very anti-austerity, and so it would be dead embarrassing if they suddenly jump back into a huge union that's forcing that on even more dire countries. So I don't know. I mean, it would just be good if it was a situation where we keep all the good things we have. They just sort of iron out kind of the kinks and they just change a bit for the inside. Although whether or not that'll actually happen remains to be seen.
Thank you very much. Anyone got any more points before I ask Joe to sum up on this topic? No? No? Okay, Joe, the floor is yours to close on this topic before we move to our next one.
Just a couple of quick points on the SNP. Despite sort of their rhetoric, I don't think they are quite anti-austerity. Certainly their fiscal plans for the election didn't show a clear anti-austerity path. And, before sort of the economic recession, their plan was to sort of adopt. Well, no, their plan was to adopt the euro. So so I think it's very difficult for the SNP.
Well, times change, situations change, and right now they're proclaiming that anyway. And if they stick to that, then it's going to look dead embarrassing if they suddenly jump into something that's all for it. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, Labour have proposed they've got a separate yes campaign. A separate sort of stay in the EU campaign, because of course they had the trouble over being in the joint campaign to keep Scotland in. But I think if they could also have a sort of a separate no campaign separate to UKIP, which would ignore immigration, well, not ignore it, but sort of sideline immigration and talk about democracy and talk about TTIP, then I think certainly in the Green Party and to the left of the Labour Party, you certainly win a lot of votes. But I don't know. I just don't think it's going to change. And I think maybe one reason why the leaders currently aren't against it is because I'm quite young, and the last couple of years is the first couple of years I've learned about the EU, and it just seems like it doesn't work. Whereas maybe the leaders, 30, 40, 50 years old, they were around when it was growing and it was building and it was, bringing Europe together. And so maybe historically they've got, they connect with it more emotionally and sort of consider it a good thing. But from looking at it from sort of a blank canvas, I just don't see sort of how the benefits of staying in outweigh the costs.
Thank you very much indeed. A few more tweets and things we've had. First, we've had a text. Don't send texts, please. But this one I quite liked. It said no to EU, yes to Eurovision. We can go with that one. A few of the other points people have made. Where are we? Sorry. Cameron, at Cameron_surname. Guys, what if, and hear me out, our own elected representatives made those regulations for us? Salman Anwar, Michael's right, treaty change would be so hard before 2017. Other countries would have to have referendums and deal with national parliaments. Robert Winfield, the common market has morphed into the EU without any public consent. That's why a referendum is necessary. Andrew, at Andrew Gavin N, keeping all the good stuff and dumping the bad with or without consent was the entire Yes campaign, wasn't it? Eric Galinsky, geez, how many Scots are on this show? Bloody Scottish Mafia, says Eric, who is half Scottish. So there we are. That's the end of that topic. We're going to move on to the next one now. We're going to go to the laser selection process again and see who it is. And this next topic is going to be introduced by Michael with support from Daryl. Off you go.
Yeah, well, this week we had the first majority Conservative budget in 19 years. Some would say George Osborne was setting out his leadership ambitions. And I think a lot of it was quite expected. There was quite a lot that was in the manifesto. A few surprises with so-called living wage. I call it a so-called living wage because if we're honest, it's not really a living wage. But it's an increase in the minimum wage, which is welcome. I don't think you can really get away from the fact that it's not a great budget for young people. I will happily admit that. But it's much better for older people and pensioners because pensioners vote, and pensioners usually vote Conservative. So it's understandable in a way. I just really wanted to sort of like figure out what everyone else's opinions on the budget was. A lot of people seem to be saying it's not quite as bad as they expected, but just wanted to get some other opinions.
It's quite horrendous by my expectations.
We'll start with Daryl. Daryl, off you go.
Well, it was quite horrendous by my expectations because, you know, we all had these kind of very doom and gloom expectations about the day, but as soon as it's just made real for some people, and quite obviously a lot of it targets the young and specifically the poor with things like, you know, removing a housing benefit for under 21s. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, who moves out of houses? You know, who moves out these days before they're 21? Well, people in care, for starters. That was something I didn't even think of till it was reminded me, because when do people get kicked out of care homes? Is it 18?
It varies depending on the authority and their background. Right. It's between 18 and 21. Sometimes a little longer.
Well, certainly anybody in a nasty situation that isn't, you know, a nice middle-class house where they might have to move out due to, you know, a bad family environment or in care or in foster or anything like that, suddenly now they've got, you know, it's such a huge bit of support just yanked away from them right now. And, of course, the grants, one of the final few grants the government actually gives you for going to university has now been sort of transitioned, regenerated into a loan. And it's really bloody sickening that, you know, it was a man, you know, who's obviously had a very privileged life, just you know, sinking his claws so deep into the young and the underprivileged. And, you know, I've heard a few folks say that it's worse than the Thatcher years, kind of this direction are going, and I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's, you know, a competition about who can be the most evil, or at least it shouldn't be, but definitely something that really talks about this issue is during one of the protests I saw somebody with a big plaque that said, "We fought her," and there was a picture of Margaret Thatcher, and it says, "Now we fight them," and it was a picture with David Cameron and George Osborne, and it just shows that, you know, they really just went completely all out in their assault on certain demographics right now.
Thank you very much indeed. A few of the tweets that we've had so far. Excuse me. Weird Times at Weird Times says the housing benefit changes. They happen in England only, and this is a particularly bad budget.
I still care about folk in England.
Yes, he just carries on to say that it's particularly bad for young people in England, because obviously some of these measures do only affect people in England because they're devolved. And thank you for turning this. Buxty with a Y at Buxty Y says it's not a good budget for anyone but Tory voters. Salman Anwar, it could be a living wage, just not the living wage. The calculations can easily be different. James. Oh, no, John Mousley, it's a terrible budget for under 25s. Salman Anwar, however, says the housing benefit under 21 is fine. There are special provisions for people that are kicked out. And Cameron attacks the young, aka make sure they can't go straight to benefits, they'll get a job and progress in life. Dylan Morris says the budget helped the core Tory vote whilst bashing everyone else. Is anyone actually surprised? Great changes affecting English students only, says Weird Times, like the £9,000 fees. And Leon French, it wasn't nearly as bad as people make out. Whatever you think, though, they did a budget based on their manifesto. And there was... Oh. Well, this is helpful. O2 are saying, we have restricted calls to this number. Thanks, O2. Thanks for really helping us out here when we're trying something. For more detail, call free. Great. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. We'll perhaps try that experiment in more depth next week. Thank you, Leon, for giving it a go. And in the meantime, I'll have words with O2. Where are we? Salman Anwar, oh no, loans you have to pay back slowly when you earn. The world's coming to an end. I think he might be being slightly sarcastic there. Buxty with the Y, at Buxty Y, agree with putting provisions in place to give vulnerable people and people in care some sort of housing benefit or independent allowance. Where are we? The idea that this was a budget for working people is hilarious, says Jack Robinson at Jack Robinson UK. Let's go to our Jack. Jack Hughes, what do you think?
I don't understand how people can actually see it as a positive, progressive budget, to be honest. When you cut tax credits and raise the living wage, the IMF works out that you're still going to be £1,000 worse off a year. And taking £12 billion from the welfare when increasing the inheritance tax to, was it £1 million, which they described as a family home. I don't know how many families can describe their house as a £1 million family home, to be honest.
Well, in the south they can't they?
Yeah, I can. My house is worth about over £900,000. It's just a normal house. We just live in Muswell Hill, which is a very,
I clearly live in a different world to you guys then, but anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, Jack. I mean, for those of us who live up north, it's much less likely that that's going to happen. It does only affect large houses up here. But for large swathes of people who live in London and the southeast, and to a lesser extent the southwest, it does come into a regular family home. Doesn't it?
Yeah, but you have to do it. You can't just do it based on the average family home when the top prices are obviously going to increase the average from the smaller price homes, so it's not representative, I don't think. And why do I keep waving my head around? I don't know. But anyway,
you're excited.
Yeah, we actually talked about something once. But yeah, I think it again reinforces how important it is for young people to actually vote, because we're the demographic that doesn't vote, and we're wondering why we're getting all these policies against us. But just in terms of one of the comments about the student loans from grants, so essentially being penalised for coming from a poorer home, because you're going to get a larger debt at the end of it that you're going to have to pay off as compared to someone who has a family with a higher income.
Thank you very much. Milton, obviously, part of this is filtered through the Northern Ireland Assembly, and I know there have been budget discussions, I use that term wisely there, in Northern Ireland over the last 18 months to 2 years, particularly with reference to welfare. But how is this viewed in Northern Ireland? I mean, what's your view in terms of how this budget might affect people in Northern Ireland?
Well, I mean, it's really no different from the rest of the UK. We have lots of unemployed people, youth unemployment, and deprivation. But obviously, you know, there's a lot of things that is devolved to our own government here, so that's not taken care of by the UK Parliament. But on the whole, I don't think we viewed it much differently from the rest of the UK, really, because you see, as the others were saying there, really, it was a bit of an attack on the youth, the under 25s, people in work under 25, people in education under 25, people who rightfully need investment. It's what economists call the under 25s have a lot of human capital, as the economists call it. So you need to invest in those people, not stop investing in them or take investment away from them. But the other point I would just like to make was I find it a bit hilarious how the BBC and other broadcasters were saying this budget meant 83 billion more spending. But that was only measured against the last budget that they brought out at the end of the last parliament, so it wasn't really 83 billion more, it was just 83 billion less of cuts.
Okay, that's an interesting point, actually. I have, for those of you who I know personally, just in case, I've reminded you of my personal mobile number, and if you want to call in, we will try that one. For now, a couple of comments people have made so far here. James Higgins at JS_Higgins_, the North should secede from the South, and then perhaps we could appoint a warden of the North, which would be rather good. Joe Hudson Small, inheritance tax on property should be based on regional averages. Dylan Morris, let local authorities set rates that vary so much based on the area. Experimental idea, but it might work. Not dissimilar in one part, I suppose, to council tax and how that works. Salman Anwar, if explained properly, it isn't a normal loan, this is a student loan thing, and it will be written off. It seems entirely fair. A confused ninja, there's no transfer of wealth or property between generations. Spending, donate it, or it reverts to the state. Salman Anwar, if you're from a poorer background but pay when you're earning a decent amount, I see no problem with it. And Leon French, people keep talking about this core Tory vote. Can someone tell me who is a core Tory voter? And Nathaniel Higgins at GGNS, poorer people will pay more for their education because of interest. Okay, Daryl, in terms of what we've been talking about here, inheritance tax and all this kind of thing, any more comments to make on that before I go to Joe from the point of view of the official opposition?
Oh, no, I want to hear this.
Okay, Joe, your turn. Go on.
Well, I think after Harriet Harman's comments today, I'm not sure we're quite the official opposition anymore. I think the SNP might have to take that. But I think it's certainly an attack on the young. I've got to go to Durham University, and Edinburgh's my second choice. And I was sort of booking sort of accommodation for Edinburgh if I get in there. And according to Edinburgh University official website, it costs around £10,000 a year to live in Edinburgh. And the university grant maximum is £5,470. That's the maintenance allowance, which is a loan. And if they then scrap the grants as well, there's going to be a shortfall. And families, I mean, you've got really poor students who are going to struggle anyway with these grants being scrapped. But families like mine, sort of, lower middle class families who earn enough to not receive any grant, my parents or I am going to have to make up that £4,500 shortfall every year. You have to get a loan from a bank, or work your way through university, which is not brilliant at a time where you're meant to be getting the education of your life. So I think it's unnecessary as well, because half the money that gets loaned out to students doesn't get paid back anyway. So it's not like with a lot of these policies, they're sort of short-term to try and save money, but in the long run they don't do anything. It's a bit like the disability allowance. I watched an interview with sort of a mother of a disabled son, and she said that sort of the money that they're cutting won't help in the long run, because if disabled people can't live independent lives, and they'll have to go into homes, and that will cost tens of thousands of pounds a year. So it doesn't seem a fiscally credible on a plan, and it seems a lot harsher than it needed to be, particularly on young people and disabled people. I mean, I'm going to benefit, probably from the sort of scrapping of the inheritance tax on houses worth £1 million, but it's completely unnecessary at this time. at least he didn't drop the top rate of tax from 45 to 40. But particularly on the housing thing, in London in particular, we have massive sort of rises in house prices. So if you are going to do an inheritance tax cut, why do it purely on housing assets? It's not anything else, and this is only going to encourage rich people to buy houses, which is not what we need at the moment. So all in all, it was a long-term fiscally irresponsible and unnecessarily harsh on young, disabled, and the sort of the poor working class. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Quick announcement, the issue over the phone number has been sorted. If you've got the number, you can call it. Okay, so if you've got the number, you can call it. Please do call now on the budget issue. I'll take a call or two before we move on to the next topic if you get in touch quickly. Make a point or ask a question. A few tweets we've had so far then. Issue about the people talking about the student loan issue, the fact that the grants have been all being converted. The comp de fufu at Stradihuvius. I'm so grateful you do this to me every week, Matt. Slightly beside the point, but the maintenance loan gets written off. Seems short-sighted. What fills that black hole? Joe Hudson Small says there isn't actually a shortfall because you can now be loaned more than the previous loans and grants came to. Buxty says it doesn't matter if it sounds fair in principle, it matters if it is fair to students who want to learn and benefit the economy. Danny Richardson even wants it's risen to £9 an hour. This is the living wage. The new national living wage will be below the level of the London living wage today. Confused Ninja talks about how that loan will be written off by the state. The argument is, I guess, that this value will fall as some people repay. So some interesting points going on there. And someone is being described as adorable, but I'm not sure who. So just in case, I'll assume it's me. Thank you very much. Eric Galinsky makes the point that first homes are exempt from capital gains tax, so why not inheritance tax? And William Cole says abolish inheritance tax, and that would be nice and simple. There we are. Okay, so don't forget you can call in quickly if you want before we finish on this issue. Michael, your party has been maligned here. They've been told that basically they're trying to get rid of the poor, the young, the disabled. Is this true?
No, unsurprisingly. I think on the whole student loans thing, I think it was Joe on Twitter who made the good point that loans are actually being increased. And you don't pay them back until, what, you earn 21 grand a year? And even then, it's not that much you pay back, like, per month or whatever it is. I think the issue is with the 12 billion of welfare cuts. In the back of a lot of Tories' minds, they thought, right, when we enter a coalition like agreement, we can lower that slightly with whoever we go into coalition with. But the issue was that only two people thought that the Conservative would win a majority: Lyndon Crosby and Gareth, you as well.
Sorry, I was in a fairly unique position there. It was only an Australian and I who thought we'd win a majority.
I think other budget measures are to be welcome. There's a rise in the personal allowance, which I know Jack will jump up and down and say is a Lib Dem policy, but I think we can both take some credit for that.
I'm going to pause you there, Michael, if I may. I'm going to come back to you because we have a caller. Hello, caller. Who are you? Oh, hang on. Hello? It's William, isn't it? Can you all hear that? Yes, all right. Give us your point, William.
My point is just the Liberal Democrat position on the issue of grants. Very interesting one. Because it just seems that if you look at the tuition fee issue, they spoke about, and very true, how the higher fees haven't deterred poor students from going to university. But yet it seems with the actual grant issue, suddenly they're outraged. And it's going to contradict their position.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. So the Liberal Democrat point of view on tuition fees and loans and so on. So I'll come to you in a moment on that one, Jack. Michael, do you want to finish your point?
No, just come back to me at the end.
Okay, Jack. The Liberal Democrats, of course, had a lot of their problems over tuition fees in the last Parliament. Surely the outrage from the Lib Dems over this now is really... It's not really something to be that worried about from any of the rest of the parties, is it?
I didn't really hear what the caller said, to be honest, but I'm just going to avoid that one and say what do the panel think to the living wage being only available to over 25s and not for under?
Okay, right. We'll see what anyone thinks of that one. Michael, do you want to come back, talk about that and everything else?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah, well, to be honest, before the election, I wasn't really campaigning for a living wage, but I think one advantage of it being over 25 is that it means young people might find it easier to be employed. Companies might employ more younger people, which is always good. But yeah, overall, I would have liked it to have been set at 18 or 21 or whatever the highest minimum wage is now. I'll be honest in that.
Thank you. Milton, what's the position with tuition fees in Northern Ireland?
Well, I don't go to university. I actually do a part-time course with the Open University, but the fees for that are greatly different from actually attending a university. But I think here it's about £3,500 a year or something like that.
Okay.
Our tuition fees are. So
a bit more like the Welsh model, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a bit lower, and if you have Irish nationality, I think you also get free tuition in Scotland.
Yes, anyone except anyone who isn't from England or Wales can get free tuition in Scotland.
Yeah,
that's European law.
It does sort of undermine the SNP's argument about sort of why free tuition is so fantastic if you know sort of English and Welsh students don't receive it. But the point about the loan getting bigger is that this year, if I'm set to go to university, accommodation £5,500, and I get and that's my loan. My whole maintenance loan is £5,500. I'm getting a £2,000 grant this year on top of that, but I can't live on £2,000 for 30 weeks of the year. It's going to cost more. So even now, you can talk about you don't have to pay it back for a long time. It's only small amounts at a time. But currently, students are not going to be able to live. There are so many policies in this budget which could lead to nightmare scenarios if a couple with 2 kids have sex and the condom splits, and suddenly a mother's faced with the choice of having an abortion or raising a child in poverty. There's so many situations like this which this budget's unnecessarily caused, and I cannot believe that Labour, for example, is embracing this 2-child policy. It's ridiculous.
Just on the issue of students and affordability, the grants were abolished in 1998 when David Blunkett was Secretary of State for Education, and they were only reintroduced a matter of years ago. How do you think students in that interim fared, myself included? Because what we tended to do was we worked. Should students not work now rather than being given free cash to not have to work?
I think there are a few more jobs around during those early Blair years, weren't there? There weren't all 0-hour contracts with a minimum wage that is less for under 25s than it is for over 25s.
But surely what you're saying there is exactly the reason why companies would take on younger people, because if you're a student, you want a 0 hours contract. I mean, the whole point of a 0 hours contract is to have flexible work, so you can say, yes, I want to work this weekend. Can I work on Wednesday instead of Thursday? I don't want to work this week at all. I'd like to work in this different part of the country. I mean, actually, is that whole thing that Labour had at the last election of abolishing 0 hours contracts and so on, would that not actually have harmed students who wanted to work and support themselves?
I do think with the rise in tuition fee costs, there has been a sort of commercialisation of university, and students now expect a much better education, and you no longer go to university to have a laugh for 3 years. You're paying, this is a £50,000 investment in your career, so you have to work down, and there's not necessarily as much of an opportunity in terms of students' time to get a job to pay off their uni fees as there maybe was 10 years ago when you weren't putting in much money yourself, so you could afford to relax and maybe get a part-time job. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure that anyone can argue that the level of work required to do any degree now is more or less than it was then. But still, a lot of people manage to fit in work. But that's perhaps another point. Milton, did you want to say something on the living wage, or did you cover it before?
No, I didn't. But there's obviously a barrier to employment for younger people because of a lack of experience. Maybe employers, maybe want a bit of an incentive to employ younger people, which would mean that's what the lower wage is for, really. I believe. So you get on somebody with less experience and train them up, and they'll end up costing you less over the time that they're employed with you. But I don't think it's right that everyone under 25 has been excluded from this £7.20 supposed living wage. It doesn't. I mean, my experience would lead me to a job that would earn more than £7.20. So I don't see why people of my age are being excluded from that, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are my age who do deserve that wage, and maybe employers won't be gracious enough to give them that wage.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to read a few tweets now, then I'm going to ask Daryl and then Michael for their closing comments on this topic. Salman Anwar and Liam Bones both talking about how zero-hour contracts are good for students. Bradley Booth at Bradley_Booth95. It's unaffordable, this is tuition fees. At least other EU countries also have free university, so the whole of the EU are not flooding into Scotland. Buxley, I don't think it's fair to suggest that any student can work, as it would depend on timetables, whether night work, for example, would suit. Leon French, not all jobs are zero-hour contracts, not all jobs are zero-hour contracts, not all jobs are zero-hour contracts. Hashtag not all jobs. Confused Ninja, doesn't requiring poorer students to work mean they have less effective time to study compared to richer students? James Higgins, no, students should not have to work at university. We work more hours in more difficult jobs in the future. He's echoed by Nathaniel Higgins. Students should not work during education. Those 3 years affect their career prospects the rest of their lives. They need focus. Darren Grimes, oh God, 0 hours clacks, and the panel's very own champagne socialist. Eric Galinsky, oh dear, Gareth Anderson just stole my point. I worked on a 0-hour contract during university. Matthew Thomas, MRT95_, my mates at university on 0 hours contracts really like them for their flexibility that they give them. And several others there. Comte de Frou-Frou at Stradihuvius. If you attend Oxbridge, you are explicitly not allowed to work during term time. If they wish to study full-time, they should be able to. And William Coles, who called in, certainly in one moment. William Coles, who was the person who called in before at Wilbo 1995, personally as a student, my 0-hour contract works swimmingly for me. Oh, and Alex Ward, I'm a student. I get the minimum amount of maintenance loan possible. I get through uni fine. You need to learn how to budget. And that's at Mr. Alex Ward. Who was that?
Can I say that?
Joe, yeah.
Just because I'm fortunate enough to support Blackpool Football Club, I don't think that should persuade people to not vote for me in the vote at the end.
Yes, there currently isn't a post-show poll because I haven't done one, but if I get to do one at the end, I'll let you all know. All right, so to close the topic, Daryl and then Michael.
Yeah, I've got nothing much to add, really.
Fair enough. Michael?
I'll try and keep it brief since we're short on time. But I think on the student loans job thing, I've got a job right now. I'm starting university come September, and I plan to work as well. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect a student to work during uni personally. Just my opinion. With the whole two-child tax credit thing, again, I don't think it's unreasonable to say if you can't afford to have more than 2 children, you probably shouldn't have more than 2 children.
Put something on the end of it.
It's the problems that it creates, though, isn't it? I mean, women.
Well,
Okay, well, let's just let Michael close because we need to move on.
But there are exemptions. I think rape is one. If you have twins or you have triplets, I believe they're all exempt as well. And just a couple of other small points that weren't touched on. I welcome the 2% commitment to the NATO budget, which I believe most of the opposition parties supported as well. And the decrease in corporation tax is also welcome. And yeah, I think it was a reasonable budget. It wasn't spectacular, but I don't believe it was awful.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Thank you at home for your comments. Let's move on. We've got 2 topics to go, so these we're going to be a little more efficient and quick on. The laser selection process says that the next one is led by birthday boy Jack. Off you
go. Is it time that cannabis was legalised? When I was looking into it, and essentially weed, or cannabis, is 114 times safer than alcohol. And just to a bit of a subtopic as well, when about 15 to 18% of the prison population is due to drug offences, and there's a 59% reoffending rate. So surely the war on drugs, or what, I can't remember who called it that, but that's what it's called, surely it's failed, and it's time to focus more efforts on either rehabilitation or legalise it altogether. But I would go for the latter. People say that if you legalise it, crime will go up. But I was looking into it. In states like Colorado, in fact, crime's gone down by around 20%. And the Institute of Economic Research said it could raise, I'm a bit sceptical about the number, but this is what it tells me, around £700 million in tax revenue. And if we're manufacturing it and it's going to be safer for people to use, if we're having a referendum on things like fox hunting, I think we should at least have a choice in things like this. I wonder what the panel think.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, anyone want to start off with some comments on this one?
I sort of agree with Jack, actually. I would legalise cannabis. It's safer than alcohol. I'm pretty sure it's healthier than the likes of tobacco. And I think if you legalise it, you can regulate it and you can tax it and the government make money and everyone's happy, really.
It would be smashing.
Daryl, it would be smashing. Why?
That's all I have to say about it. It would be smashing. There's nothing about it, not one thing that would be bad about it, not one single thing.
Well, there might.
Yeah, go on.
The difference between Colorado and the UK is that in Colorado there was sort of already a massive drug problem there. So it was sort of an extreme situation that needed an extreme solution. And what people who are against sort of legalising would say is that because drug usage in this country isn't as high as it was in Colorado, it could lead to more people using the drug. And the sort of conservative argument is that it would be a gateway to more dangerous drugs. Well, I suppose that's the one caveat.
I don't think it's an extreme solution. It's just a different solution. And they've not tried anything different for decades and decades and decades. It's time to try something else. And if it doesn't work and, suddenly it becomes apocalypse now, then maybe we can try something else. But it's time now to try another possibility, and one that I can't see any immediate or far-reaching repercussions with.
Great, thank you very much. We've got a call. Hello, who are you? John, hello John. Give us your point.
I was just going to say, the panel has mentioned several times that cannabis is several times safer than alcohol. Could that not be put down to the fact that not as many people use this as alcohol? And if it was legalised, suddenly we'd see that multiply decrease rapidly. I'm not against legalising cannabis, but it's something to consider for the dangers.
Okay, but great point. Thank you very much indeed. So, panel, how about that then? This idea that actually cannabis is safer than alcohol is simply, that is in large part down to the fact that alcohol usage is so much greater, so much more widespread than cannabis usage. It's bound to be safer.
It's physiologically safer as well. I mean, scientists have said, haven't they?
There are arguments over that, but also, cannabis also can cause psychoses. It can cause, greater different types of cancers in the throat, the mouth, and so on. Are we not just potentially legalising more ways for people to develop long-term terminal illnesses?
Daryl,
let me go to Daryl. Go on.
Nah, I've said enough. Joe can speak.
Right. I was going to say that as safe as it is, it's not as safe as nothing. So, with all these sort of growing restrictions on tobacco, plain packaging, all of that movement to try and eradicate tobacco consumption in the UK, I just think it's sort of interesting that people are almost going backwards towards more sort of dangerous. However safe it is compared to tobacco and compared to alcohol, it's still dangerous, especially long term. We don't know all the long term implications of it. So I don't know. I just think I don't have a particularly strong opinion either way, but I don't think there's necessarily a really strong argument to legalise it, partly because I don't think there's a massive problem at the moment with it.
Thank you very much. A few of the tweets we've had, and then I'll come back to the panel. Eric Galinsky says, I believe the war on drugs term was coined by Richard Nixon. Jack Robinson at Jack Robinson UK. Legalise all drugs. Stop treating addicts like criminals. Salman Anwar, should we legalise cannabis? No. I don't want to get into a debate about this, though, but I could be persuaded by decriminalisation. Buxty, legalisation would mean more tax, better quality control, and less crime due to a lack of demand for illegal varieties. Dylan Morris at Dylan HM, legalise all drugs and release all prisoners that have been jailed for drug-related victimless crimes. I'm feeling radical today. Nathaniel Higgins, decriminalise all drugs, legalise most. At Stratohuvius, Gavin, not enough, legalise all drugs. Cameron, it's not safer than alcohol. Idiots are idiots. Moderation, but legalise and tax the hell out of it. Matthew Thomas, cannabis should be taxed and regulated like alcohol and tobacco. It would save police and court time and resources as well. And goodness me, there are lots and lots of tweets about this one at the moment, and I can't really keep up. Andrew, is the government banning psychoactive drugs going to legalise cannabis? No. James Higgins, people take drugs whether they're legal or not. The law clearly isn't a deterrent, so either change the law or scrap it. And it appears that there are lots and lots of... John Mousey, adding on to the point he made on the phone, it's not as safe as nothing, but if it's only as bad as tobacco and alcohol, let people kill themselves in a new way. And Michael, I don't think we've had one from Michael before. Hey, it's Michael94. Alcohol causes physical harm, so it's easy to measure. Cannabis causes mental health issues later in life. Decriminalise, not legalise. Right, so who wanted to come in on something here?
I would like to comment, please.
Can I make one comment? I like the guy who said would have better quality control. Like, that's his main concern. It's like, oh, it'll be even better. Jesus.
Because there's obviously, presumably, nothing worse than poor quality cannabis.
No, they'll put you off for life.
Milton.
Well, it is true that it's easier to control these things whenever they're legal. That's just a fact, and you can't get rid of a problem simply by legislating against it, which is why there are such vast numbers of people in prison in America for minor drug offences, really, for just having cannabis. But there's a lot of propaganda out there from people who want to legalise cannabis, and I'm not sure exactly 114 times safer than alcohol. I'm not sure exactly that's a reliable figure. For example, I know people my age and younger who are suffering from cancer, and it's nearly like they're buying into this idea that cannabis can cure cancer because they're so desperate for a cure for cancer, because obviously that's something that's very relevant. But there's a lot of propaganda from the pro-legalization of cannabis campaign saying that it does cure cancer, so they're buying into this, and it's really dangerous, actually. So I would like, I'm not against legalizing cannabis, but I would like some actual concrete evidence for it.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in on this point?
Can I just say, I think, having listened to it, and I think I agree that it should maybe be decriminalised, but maybe not legalised. I certainly think with sort of, Russell Brand talks a lot of rubbish, but on this issue I think he's bang on, in that for sufferers, people with addictions, I think sort of the way don't just send them to prison. We need a lot sort of softer sort of rehabilitation style of trying to help them rather than just throwing them in jail. And I think if we decriminalise it in that way, try and take a better approach to drug addicts, I think maybe that's the more sort of important and urgent issue than legalising sort of the drug. I don't know.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else want to comment on this before I ask Jack to close this
thing? Certainly, I've never believed that it actually cures cancer, but there is scientific research and many examples that show that the cannabis oil repairs cells damaged by the cancer. So it's not an actual cure, although if given the right legalization in the right area of research, who knows what exactly it could do. Certainly it's done a lot so far. There's not much else that you can say it repairs damaged cancer cells.
Well, that's very true. Okay, Jack, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, essentially, if we can control it, we can benefit from it through tax and whatnot. And the cost of housing a criminal in prison is over £40,000 a year, which if you decriminalise drugs, then there's an extra cost gone as well. It limits organised crime if you have control over it. I think at least we should have a say on if we do want to decriminalise it. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. A few more tweets before we move on to our final topic here. Alex Ward, legalise all the illegal drugs, ban all hay fever medication that makes you feel drowsy, sorted. Kieran Ferris Bureau at Kieran FB, I've never heard a single person claim cannabis cures cancer. Danny Richardson, forget the legal cost. The human cost is invariably higher when you put a pile of white crap in a criminal's hands rather than regulating it. It's a point echoed by the Comte de Frou at Stradahuvius. Quality control is an interesting point, to be fair. The big danger of several drugs are poorly made batches and combinations. Yes, we lamb at Blue Liberal 1. The case for banning alcohol is far stronger than for cannabis. So there we are, some interesting points there. To close that topic, thank you for all of your contributions. Our final topic for the night. Again, this will be another quick blast here. Goes to Milton. Off you go.
Okay, so since the general election, there's obviously been quite a lot of talk of electoral reform because first past the post voting system isn't obviously the greatest system for voter representation. But the alternative that most countries seem to use is proportional representation with a single transferable voting system. It has its problems too, and I just wanted to. I don't have a firm position on any of this. Obviously, I would prefer proportional representation, but it has problems. For example, our government, we actually have 5 parties running the government, which is ridiculous. Most other countries, because they have a proportional representation government, they're mostly either minority governments or coalition governments, which makes it harder for them to push their own political agenda. Whereas the first past the post system generally creates a very strong government, a very strong majority government, which doesn't have those kinds of problems. But then it has the problem of poor voter representation.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to jump on you here, Michael, to start with, because obviously we had a referendum between AV and First Past the Post. People voted to keep First Past the Post. That suits the Conservatives, doesn't it? Because they benefit enormously from this system.
Yeah, that's true. Far from it for me to be accused of being a Lib Dem, but as well as supporting the legalisation of cannabis, I kind of do support a reform in the voting system as well. Not completely, but I would make the House of Lords electable.
I think you're in the wrong party, Michael.
So I'm always told. I would keep First Past the Post for the Commons, and I would put in some sort of PR system for the Lords and make it smaller, maybe 200, 300 seats, which give you a bit of both. A lot of people seem to talk about how it's undemocratic to not have a PR system, but I kind of subscribe to the mantra that democracy gives you the right to vote, not to guarantee it's a proportional system. But yeah, all in all, I would favour some reform, but I wouldn't want a fully proportional system.
Thank you, Jack. You're trying to poach Michael there.
Well,
What's your view on What's your view on the electoral reform issue?
Well, when the Greens and UKIP get 3 million in whatever UKIP got votes, and they get 1 seat, that can't be considered right. We're elected a government to represent the people, but it's not representative of the people. And people saying that coalitions can't work when 21 out of 28 Western European countries have STV, and we talked to men's up in coalition, and such as Germany, and they seem to be doing fine.
Just for entirely sort of, because I'm an accuracy freak, STV actually is generally only really used in Northern Ireland for European elections, and of course for PR in general, because there are lots of different systems of PR, STV being one of them. The only countries that use STV really are Australia for the Senate, Fiji for their general elections, and of course we use it in Northern Ireland for the Northern Ireland Assembly and for European elections in Northern Ireland. But it is the system, if I remember correctly, someone please at home correct me if I'm wrong, that was suggested for the House of Commons by the original Royal Commission, over about 100 years ago. That was STV in particular. Of course, you use a system of AMS in Scotland for the Scottish Parliament, and in Wales for the Welsh Assembly.
And
STV,
in
of course,
Germany, I think, as well.
And in Germany, yes. STV, of course, also used, in Ireland for the Doyle elections there. Right, who else would like to come in on this one? Electoral reforms. Go on.
I think it's all very well saying we need a PR system, but there are a lot of sort of weaknesses with each type of system. I think we want to keep the constituency link between MPs. So I think the way to go is to make the House of Lords a lot more powerful and to allow it to sort of hold the government to account a lot more. And so what I would do is sort of similar to the way you have presidential elections and then midterms, is maybe every 4 years elect parliament, and then sort of every 4 years, halfway through that parliament, you would elect the Lords as completely PR. So the Lords would have no constituency link. MPs would be voted in by first past the post to keep that constituency link. So then you could have a House of Lords that is democratic and can properly sort of look at government bills and tackle them. And by having the elections at different times, you would avoid sort of if let's say we just had this election, the Tories winning majority in the Commons and winning a majority in the Lords, so they could easily get everything through. But I just think with everyone sort of shouting, yeah, we need PR, I think there are a lot of unintended consequences of quite a few PR systems that aren't maybe sort of fully considered. Creating like 2 types of MPs, or as I say, losing that constituency link. So there's no perfect system. Yeah.
Thank you. A few of the tweets people have sent in so far on this one. There does seem to be quite a lot of support for STV in particular. Cameron underscore surname has tweeted the results of the general election in terms of the number of votes per seat, with the DUP finding it the easiest to win seats, requiring only 23,000 votes per seat, and
No
UKIP
surprise.
the hardest, requiring 3.8 million per seat. We've got several different ideas. People are tweeting about how to use the Commons and the Lords based on what Michael has said here. Joe Hudson Small says, I want a fair government, not a strong one. Chris, at all riff, no raff, we're only having this argument because the Conservatives were elected. Had that not been the case, there wouldn't be a whisper. Matthew Thomas at MRT95_. I saw somewhere AV would have actually doubled the Tory majority because of UKIP's second preferences. Eric Galinsky, oh look, Michael Craig just came out in favour of full communism. However, he gets support from Alex Ward. Yes, elected Lords, and although I do try and resist giving my opinion, I agree with that as well. And so Danny Richardson's Conservative tweet would apply to me equally there, I think. Joe Hudson Small, I wouldn't say that not being able to push a strong political agenda against the will of over half your electorate is a negative thing. Joe Pollock at JPollock1996, first past the post delivers strong, stable governments that can put through reform. We should stick with it. And the debate goes on quite a lot there. There we are. Anyone else want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, you mentioned at the start, Gareth, that first past the post suits us quite well. But right now, the Conservatives don't actually have a majority in the House of Lords. We're outnumbered by the other Lords, and so under another system, we might sort of see a fairer government because we could possibly command, well, whoever wins an election could command a majority in both houses, which isn't the case at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else want to comment on it then before I ask Milton to close?
Just going to play my violin for the Lib Dems a minute. In 2010, they got 23% of the vote and only 8% of the seats. That, again, can't be right.
And this time you only got 8 seats. And
how things change.
Yes.
Many Lords, though. Many Lords.
Many
Yeah.
Lords. Yes. Thank you. Right, Milton, if you'd like to close this topic, please.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, everyone's kind of aware of the problems of the two systems, but I think there is a need for a strong government in any country, really. You need somebody to take charge of things and drive things forward. What we see in Northern Ireland is that things don't get done because there's just too much horse trading going on. There's just too much political fighting, and things move at a glacial pace here. And I'm not 100% sure on how it works in other PR systems around the world. But whenever you have coalitions, which are going to happen almost every election, I can imagine that that's going to be a problem. So you do need a strong government to lead by, whether you agree with them or not.
Lovely. Thank you, Milton. Thank you, all of my guests. Thank you to everyone at home who has joined in. But do let me thank you individually. Thank you very much, Daryl, for all your contributions tonight. We're very grateful as ever. Same to you, Jack. Thank you. And again, happy birthday to you. And I do hope the gentleman playing rugby, I think, who gave you that bruise, appreciate that this will be forever remembered on your Facebook photos. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you. We hope to see you back again soon. We will, in fact, be having, I intend to try and have a Labour leadership election special. We had one for the Lib Dems the other week, so perhaps you'd be interested in coming back on that one. Michael, thank you for actually not your first show, but your first one with me. It's nice to see you. Thank you very much for coming on. Well, thank you very much. I'll get a call from Leon any moment as he swears and berates me. And Milton, thank you very much for joining us for the first time. I hope we'll see you back again. And likewise, if you have any friends across the spectrum in Northern Ireland and you'd like to join, have a couple of them on in, that would be great as well. We're always looking for new people from other parties and other parts of the UK and indeed the world. So thank you, Milton. Thank you all at home for your tweets, your comments, the occasional call, and even the odd text. We're going to have to go now because we've talked about all of our topics, and I do feel that my dodgy leg is about to drop off if I stay standing up any longer. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next week, and if you'd like to be on next week or in future, do let me know. DM us at Spectrum Debates. We'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and good night.